Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Lordi Scream Writers Guild on March 31st on Atomic Fire Records. This album has 14 tracks, 55 minutes in length, and this is the band's 18th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish rock band. When you look at this album, you have to look at the concept and then the execution of that concept in the structure and design that they put together. The concept is extremely interesting. Scream Writers Guild Award Show. And there are two interlude tracks that help define that award show and the experience of what's happening in front of you. Then you have 12 songs that are stories, horror stories, loosely based on real horror stories and real horror characters. So this idea, this concept is something that I can connect with. But then how they execute it is where I have the problem. The album almost feels like it starts with a second song. Should have started with an intro track. The second track should have been the intro track. Then you do have an interlude around the middle that gives you a sense of where you're going with this experience, of where they're taking you. But it doesn't really have a well-defined end. It needed an interlude at the end, or an outro track I should say, that really closes off the chapter, the experience, the story, the concept. This would allow the overall feel of going from first to last more complete. You could immerse yourself better in the concept and in the individual stories. It feels to me like they tried to create songs that can work on an individual basis and then try to find a way to put them together with this story that ties them all as one. It doesn't work. This album doesn't need that concept for these individual stories to work. And if you're going to create a concept, then you have to blend them better with that concept and within the execution for the album to have a sense of fluidity from first to last. It's not there. It really feels broken. It really feels chaotic at times. As far as the sound experience is concerned, this album is a modern rock album, but it has a huge influence from the 80s, and you're going to see it perhaps more with the synths, with the keyboards. And most of the songs that take over the experience, they take over the tracks, they subjugate to a secondary role everything else, and they become the main protagonists of every single story. This works well, but it starts to become a little bit redundant after a while. It starts to become predictable. It also dilutes a lot of the rock elements that the album has. And when you think about horror stories, I think a pure rock and roll album with still synthesizers, still keyboards in order to create atmosphere, but having them a little bit more layered into the sound and not necessarily creating the sound would create a much better and stronger experience and would allow the songs to have a much deeper connection with the topic and story within the songs. There are tracks on this record that offer that experience, but there's very few and far in between. Most of them feel like they're coming out of an arcade in the 80s, something out of Stranger Things. The synthesizers really create that backdrop of throwback experience almost on every single song. And it's not to say that they don't work well, and it's not to say that they don't have a great impact. It just feels like it starts to become very linear, and the overall experience is always one of taking you back, not one necessarily of pushing you forward. The drums, for example, they have great sound on this album. I honestly felt like they were one of the reasons why the more rock-driven songs had the sound that they had, which was a large sound, a very thick volume all around. So I really enjoyed the drum sound. It's just that they were not always allowed to express themselves freely because, once again, the keyboards really took control of most of these songs. The guitars is one of those elements that you can see the potential, and sometimes you were hoping for a lot more out of them. You can definitely see the potential and the quality of them in the guitar solos. This album has great guitar solos, very classic approach, classic rock, classic heavy metal approach that gives a little bit of a nostalgic feel to how these stories and how these songs are coming together. So it's a nice blast from the past without necessarily making the sound feel throwback. And that makes the solos have quality and added value to how the songs are put together. But outside of the solos, you don't see the guitars having that same impact, that same experience balanced out throughout all 12 songs. 12 out of the 14 because of the two interludes. You see the guitars losing a little bit of steam here and there, overshadowed by those keyboards and being subjugated to that secondary role. I honestly think that they had all the right ingredients here, but this required to be almost a more rock and roll driven album and not necessarily a pop rock album over 90% of its duration. because even the vocals help with that more rock feel and rock drive that these songs could have had. I love the raspiness on the vocals. I love the backing vocals. I love the choirs. All of those things add so much nuances. They add so much quality to the storytelling aspect, to the story themselves, to the lyrical content, to how these songs come across. So all you really needed was a little bit more meat on the bone as far as the guitar sound is concerned, and you would have had a little bit more of a direct sound experience that would perhaps feel a little bit stronger, a little bit more unified across every single track on this record. It's an album that still offers catchy songs. It still offers hooky tracks. That is Lordi after all. But it's also an album that at times just feels a little bit too thin. It feels like there's not enough under the covers for you to really be spooked or scared or even enjoy the experience. It's an album that leaves you wanting slightly more, from the sound all the way to the concept. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Dead Again, Jayne. This is the opening track, which I honestly don't think that this should have been the opening track, but it's the opening track. It allows the guitars to really drive the song with the drums. It pushes the keys down. This is one of my favorite tracks because of that. It pushes the keys down more as a layer and allows the guitar sound, it allows the rock and roll sound to take more control and be the essence of the overall song itself. It's still very hooky, it's still very catchy, it has an outstanding chorus both musically and vocally, and it's pretty much what I wanted out of the majority of this album. A rock song with great keyboards and synths, infusing melody, infusing atmosphere, giving a sense of throwback, but still allowing the song to sound a little bit more modern. Next we have The Bride, a nice ballad that breaks the record in two. It's always that nice song to have at the middle of an album. It allows you to kind of reset from everything that you heard up until that point and get ready for what's coming next. A ballad that depends on piano, acoustic guitars, and vocals. Very stripped down. And because of that stripped down nature of the song, and because of the elements that become the cornerstones of the track, the song has a little bit of a country vibe to it. It has what I would call a southern twang in the sound, and at times even in the way the vocals come across. A track that has a great chorus, bigger and expanding even more, feeling not completely disconnected from the verses. That's the beauty about this chorus, is that you don't feel like the verses are here and the chorus is there. The two feel very similar to one another, but that chorus is bigger. The hookiness, the catchiness, the vocal delivery, the melody, the volume increasing ever so slight, all these little nuances, when you add them up, it makes it feel like the track changes so much, even though it's barely moving. It has an amazing solo, a solo that adds so much energy, that adds so much beauty, that brings a little bit of a mixture of Dire Straits and Pink Floyd. I really enjoy this guitar solo, one of my favorites in the entire album, but this record is filled with outstanding guitar solos. A track that has that ballad, throwback southern ballad to it, and it was absolutely beautiful. It matched the emotion and the lyrical content, a little bit of the darkness in the lyrical content as well. So it's a song that's extremely well connected from sound to lyrics to concept to execution. Last but not least, Lycantropical Island. This is my absolutely favorite song on the entire record. Perhaps one of the catchiest, hookiest songs that this album offers. The keys are outstanding. Now here's a song where the keys play more of a predominant role, and it's not necessarily your typical rock and roll song. This is more of a pop rock song with a huge 80s influence into it. And when you have 2 or 3 of these in a mixture of 14 overall tracks, that's okay for an album like this. I just feel like there's too many of these songs, and not all of them reach the potential that this one does. This song is memorable. Great texture, great sound, great execution. The elements are all in the right order, at the right place, at the right time, in the right amounts. Great vocals. The chorus is outstanding. The melody in the chorus, the vocal delivery in the chorus, the musicality of the chorus, it becomes tattooed in your brain. It's one of those songs that you listen to it once, the second time around you're singing along, at least the chorus. It just has great energy and great vibe. Pure pop rock, 80s influenced. I loved it from beginning all the way to the end. This is it. Lordi, Scream Writers Guild on March 31st on Atomic Fire Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. use the comment section below. I'll be reading those, getting back to you. Take care, guys.